Those that are more persecuted, I ask, Lord, that you give them strength as they meet and that you give them protection. Meanwhile, let us not in this country with our freedom take it for granted. Instead, Lord, let us seize this moment that we would be able to study this word of yours and we'd be able to be drawn closer to you from it. This we ask in your son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen. Well, I like collecting weird things. Like, I collect many things, and people know my passions and my weird things that I like. Like, I love Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, and I like collecting costumes. I got lots and lots of costumes, and every now and then I wear one to preaching on the Sunday morning, and everybody's blessed. And like the Grinch on last Christmas and whatnot. And I got so much more to go with. In fact, I just got a new one yesterday. I am so excited to share it when it's appropriate, and I have no idea when that's going to be. But nonetheless, I do, guys. I love that. But I also collect weird little knick-knacky things. Like I have this was called the Youper bug killer. Okay, this is my Youper bug killer. I spent my first 13 years of my life in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, known as the UP, and people who were really raised and from infancy onward are kind of like Youpers. Okay, and so this is the Youper bug killer, and what it says is that you have this little hammer. So you take the bug you want to kill, you place it on this little circle, and then you it's the most useless thing in the face of the world. It really is useless. Then I went to Hell, Michigan, and when I was there, I bought this snow globe of a snowman. But because it was Hell, Michigan, he melted. And so I collect weird little things like that, stuff that's not your norm. And I love it. And I love just weird, odd little things. Or like this stuffed animal that I got. This is in the image of a brain cell. And so many times I would end up saying something along the lines of, "Oh my word, that show or that movie or that program was so bad and so stupid, I lost a brain cell." And I would say that repeatedly. So a friend of mine went online and bought me a brain cell. So they said, whenever I lose a brain cell again, I have this one to replace it. But I did notice looking at this, I looked it up online. This is actually anatomically correct for a brain cell. How weird is that? To have tens of thousands, if not millions of these in your head. Okay, no, without the eyeballs. Okay, so but without the eyeballs. Okay, because the eyeballs kind of eliminate the reality of the brain cell. Okay, so just without the eyeball. But this is what's in your brain. Isn't that kind of fun to know? And so here's the thing. We're going to be looking at a passage in Deuteronomy about how other religions collect things and how God has a desire for an image. For one thing that Christians are not to collect are images of Him. Okay, and what that means and why that's so necessary and how that plays out and what we deal with that today. And so we're going to be kind of looking at this. So it's in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 4, starting at verse 14. And I'm going to title this entire Deuteronomy series as Israel's Mulligan. Okay, the word Deuteronomy literally means second law or the second giving of the law. This is where Israel gets a mulligan, gets a redo, gets a do-over. Okay, I don't know if you ever played golf. I stink at golf. Golf is not my friend. And whenever I play golf, mulligan is necessary for me. In fact, I need thirds and fourths mulligans so that I can actually hit the ball and have it go where I aim. Whenever I hit the ball, it likes to go forward and then act like it hit a tree and go to the right and just hook something awful. And so I've almost thought that if I want to hit it forward, I just need to hit it that way. And then if I hit it, it will go where I want it to go. But Israel needed a mulligan. They wrecked their chance of trying to get to the promised land. God was like, hey, here's the promised land. I'm bringing you out of Egypt to this land. It is a land that I want to give to you guys. I want you to flourish there. I want you to thrive there. And Israel rebelled. They didn't trust God. They feared people more than they feared God. They cared more about the power of armies more than they cared about the power of the Lord. And so they didn't go. They didn't conquer the land like they were supposed to. So God had them wander for 40 years. This is a quick recap of the book of Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers for you. And so they had to wander for 40 years till the next generation sprung up. And when that next generation is now up, they are given the law again. They were given the 10 Commandments in Exodus. They're re-given the 10 Commandments in Deuteronomy. It's the second giving of the law. And so God gives them the law a second time for the next generation to have so they may be able to go into the promised land and this time succeed where their parents failed. That's kind of the expectation here. And the question is for the reader, does Israel succeed? And the question becomes for the reader on a personal level. All our parents were sinful. All our parents, none of them were perfect. They did good things, they did bad things. There are things that we can learn from our parents. And the question is, when we look at the mistakes our parents made, will we carry on that pattern or will we break that pattern? Will we be able to do better than what our parents did and better than our grandparents? Will there be an improvement in our family legacy rather than the continual downslide of our family legacy? That's kind of the question that's being asked of each reader as they go through this book. And so it's going to be a very theological, very historical, and at times intensely personal. And it might be more personal for some of us than others, depending on our upbringing and what our parents were like. So, the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 4, what we find here is about God's self manifestation, who God is, how he reveals himself, what he looks like from the descriptions given to us, and how he does not want us to make images of him or even try. Okay, so that's what we're going to be looking at to kind of start off. So this is in chapter 4, starting at verse 15. And hopefully you got your Bibles open, you got your apps ready, your thumbs strengthened. Here we go. So, for your own good. This is kind of God talking through Moses to give to the people. For your own good, be extremely careful, because you did not see any form on the day the Lord spoke to you out of the fire at Horeb. Okay, so God is saying that every time he appears to Israel, they see fire, they see cloud, they see all these manifestations, but in the end, there is no form. It's not like a being with 10 fingers and 10 toes standing before them. So he's telling them, so be careful. You did not see any form whenever God talked to you, O Israel. So be very careful not to act corruptly and make an idol for yourselves in the shape of any figure, a male or female form, or the form of any beast on the earth, any winged creature that flies in the sky, any creature that crawls on the ground, or any fish in the waters under the earth. It's interesting. This is like creation in reverse, starting with man and working backwards. Okay, in case you're curious why this order is very fascinating. When you look to the heavens and see the sun, moon, and stars, that's the first thing he made after he made the heavens and earth. So it's continually going backwards. When you look to the heavens, see the sun, moon, and stars, all the array of heaven, do not be led astray to bow down and worship them. The Lord your God has provided them for all people everywhere under heaven. But the Lord selected you and brought you out of Egypt's iron furnace. Keep note of that. We'll come back to that in a moment. Selected you out and brought you out of Egypt's iron furnace to be a people for his inheritance as you are today. The Lord was angry with me on your account. This is still Moses writing, talking to the people of Israel. So the Lord was angry with me on your account. This was when people were wanting water and they're wanting food, and Moses was just frustrated and angry and got arrogant and took his stick and hit the rock twice instead of once to get water from the rock so that flowed even more. And then God told him, that was bad. It made you the center of this, not God the center of this. And so he got punished. And so God swore that I would not cross the Jordan and enter the good land the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. So Moses is reminding them and kind of blaming them. He's like, you know what, guys? I don't get to see the land that you guys get to see. Thanks. Okay, that's a little bit of that attitude there. Kind of a thanks for nothing, you guys. And so I won't be crossing the Jordan because I'm going to die in this land. So it's like, thank you guys for the death sentence. And even though it is still Moses' fault. But you are about to cross over and take possession of this good land. He's like, must be nice because I'm not going to be seeing it. Be careful then not to forget the covenant of the Lord your God that he made with you, and make an idol for yourselves in the shape of anything he has forbidden you. For the Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. Okay, and so that's these verses from the verses 15 to 24. Now, some thoughts on all of this, on what's happening with this, and trying to piece this all together, and thoughts for reflection for you guys on this would be to start with how God has no form. Okay, God has no form. This is extremely important, that God is a very personal God, but he has no personal form. Okay, and that's going to be awkward for some of us to wrap our brains around. And it's something that he says very clearly, that when he spoke to them at Mount Horeb, that they saw no form of him. And that's repeated multiple times in the book of Isaiah, repeated multiple times in the book of Psalms, and on it goes, all the way until we get even in the New Testament, the book of John, chapter 4, verse 24, which says that God is spirit and that we must worship in spirit, that God is spirit and spirit has no form. And it's important to realize that God has no form, because let's say if he had a body, the question would be, how did he get that body? Does that body have blood in it? And if it has blood in it, the Arnold Schwarzenegger truism becomes accurate. If it bleeds, you can kill it. Okay. So, predator reference for you. And so if it bleeds, you can kill it. And so if God has blood, that would be a problem because you can die. And what happened with Jesus, by the way, when he took on a body and was in human form like that and was a human like that, and he did have blood, what happened to Jesus because of that blood? He died. Okay. And if God the Father is life, God the Father cannot, never will, or even have the potential of death. And since God the Father cannot have death, God the Father cannot have blood. And if God the Father cannot have blood, he cannot have a body of which blood circulates. It doesn't work that way. God cannot have a stomach because then he would require eating, and eating would equal death afterwards as well. There's so many things going on. If God had a body, it would just create so many problems. Not only that, if anybody saw God and saw his body, what could they do afterward? Make an image of God and make a graven image of it, a painting of it, or what have you. Any number of people, like Isaiah, who saw God and opened his eyes and was in heaven, or John, when he saw the vision and saw heaven and God at the throne and all the seals, would be able to leave that vision and say, I saw God, and he looked a lot like Tom Hanks. It just wouldn't work. It would be very, very odd. Okay, and so God is spirit, has no being, has no body like that. And so what we call it is an interesting phrase. It's called that God is non-corporeal. Okay, or the non-corporealness of God. That's the systematic theological term for you, in case you want to read more on this. Okay, you would want to find something talking about the Trinity and the different aspects of the Trinity: God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit, and the non-corporalness of God the Father. That would be where you would start looking that up and what that means. And the word non-corporeal is really, really simple. It means God has no mass, God has no weight, God has no body, God has nothing like that. And now, when you hear that, God has no body, you might want to push back a little bit and say, but, Mr. Coyne, I remember reading about the hand of God. I remember reading about the don't break the heart of God. I remember reading, may his face shine upon you. And so if we have these words like hand, or like Moses saw God's back, and on, clearly he must have a body then, to which the answer to that is no. Those are a type of grammar called anthropomorphism. And that's a big fancy word. It simply means that we attribute human like qualities onto something that does not, in order to understand it better. Okay, so we can't understand what we're seeing on some occasions, so we do the best we can to describe it using words we do understand, or we go as far as an anthropomorphism, where we take a human term and we apply it to something non-human, so that at least we could try to wrap our brains around what's happening. Okay, so that's all those are anthropomorphisms. God doesn't have a hand, he doesn't have a back, he doesn't have anything like that, because God is spirit, and spirit doesn't have that. Okay, and this is actually, like I said, it's extremely important. It's extremely important, because check this out. If God had a body, that body could change, and God does not change. If God had a body, that body could be created, and God has no beginning. If God had a body, that body could die, and God cannot die. Okay, on and on the issues go. It just keeps going like that. And so it can get kind of a little bit complicated. And this is why God does not want graven images made of him, because God is above image. He is above that. He is outside of that. Every false religion you look at that worships some weird selection of a collection of deities, they are able to make graven images. You look at Rastafarianism, you look at Hinduism, you look at Buddhism, you look at all these other religions like that. And what they have are different images of their God. Maybe they look like an elephant with multiple arms. Maybe they look like a being with a bird head. Maybe they look like, Horus or many a number of things, but they have these images. And when you have an image of your deity, what you are doing to your deity is you are controlling it. You control that which you can make an image of. That's what humans do. Can we control God? No, nor are we to even try to. But whenever you can make an image of a God, you are able to control it because you're able to summon it at your will. You're able to have that image placed upon you for protection, forcing the hand of that deity to act as you see fit, and on it goes. This is why God's like, no, no image. I have no image. You are to make no image, which is why when they made the Ark of the Covenant and they had the throne on there, it's empty. Because God has no image and he's not on that throne, he's on the throne. And since God is spirit, he is able to be omnipresent. He is able to be everywhere at once. He can be in Russia and in America at the same time. He can be in 1821 and 2056 at the exact same time, because being spirit means you are not bound by time, you're not bound by space. If you have a body, you are. If you have a body, you are bound because you can't be multiple places at the same time, because a body is physical and therefore automatically has with it inherent limitations. Because we are created by God and have a body, we are limited. Can we be everywhere at once? No, as much as we wish we could be. And I know some parents have developed a type of sixth sense. They know when something wrong is happening in their house, even though they're not there. I usually hear it like, it seems too quiet around here. The kids are into trouble. So I understand there's that mom's intuition thing or dad's intuition. That is very different than being omnipresent. Okay, because of our bodies, we're limited. When Jesus took on humanity and was human, he was unable to be omnipresent. He was limited because of his body. He could not be in this country and this country simultaneously. He had to walk, he had to travel, he got tired, had to sleep, rebuild his energy, keep walking, keep traveling. When he left the city and said, I want to go somewhere and pray, and he left many people sick because he already done a lot of healing, but then he left and people were still sick. They were still sick because Jesus wasn't healing, because he left. And he left because he had a body that left. Okay, now God the Father does not have a body, so he is able to be everywhere all at once because spirit is not contained in a form. And even when we think the idea of spirit, probably some of you might think something like a glowing ball that's just wispy and semi transparent like a ghost. Well, that glowing ball now has a form. You just called it a ball. And now it's not God at all, because God has absolutely no form. Okay, but we have this inner desire, though, to try to conform God to an image because we love our images. We do. Humanity loves our images. We love our brain cells, right? We love these things. Now you might not like these. I would ask you to repent of that and like these. These are awesome. Okay, stuffed animal microbes are cool. But you might not care for, but if you look at humanity, man, we love our images. Think of it like this. What did Jesus die on? The cross. Think about it. How much do we love our crosses? Right? Let me ask this question. Let's just have fun. We're gathered together. It's evening. We just got done with VBS. Let's go crazy. That's all like fun. Just bear with me on this. This will be fun. Let's pretend that God's prophecy about Jesus' death and resurrection was not including crucifixion, but any form of death, it didn't matter. Okay, so let's say the prophecy did not include crucifixion. It could be any form of death. And then let's pretend, just pretend with me that Jesus came in 2022. Okay, and this is the year he is supposed to live and die and rise again. And let's say, just for fun, that was not to happen in Jerusalem, but it's supposed to happen in the United States of America. Just hypothetically speaking, okay? I have to be very clear in the hypothetically. I'm not trying to say that America is the new Israel and blah, blah. I'm not doing all that, okay? I'm just hypothetically on a sci-fi movie, pretend, okay? And let's pretend it's played by Leonardo DiCaprio, so you know I'm making this up. Okay, let's just make it clear so that nobody misquotes me or leaves here saying, Pastor, I think Jesus is coming today. That's not what I'm saying. But let's pretend, okay, that his first coming was in the year 2022 in America and that he is to die by the hands of our governmental system. How might he be put to death in our governmental system? Lethal injection would be a big one. If it wasn't lethal injection, what might be an alternate method that he might die according to our governmental system? The electric chair would be one. Firing squad is being brought back in our country now. Okay, that's becoming a thing that states are voting on. And so let's just back up now. Back up now, because Christians, we love our images, right? I mean, how many have had like a cross necklace? Or jewelry, or a cross on your emblem of a car, or whatever. Now, let's pretend that Jesus died by electric chair. Would it be good and appropriate then for us to walk around with little chairs hanging around from our necks on our, I mean, isn't that weird? But we love our images, or little syringes. Or maybe a whole bunch of rifles, because firing squad, maybe 7 of them. It'd be like a big fancy necklace. Like you see those ladies with all those little like bulbs and beads kind of, and it's just a gun for each one, for each of the firing squad. I mean, how weird would that be? We'd be like, dude, you have a necklace of an electric chair. That's weird. Okay, but keep in mind, the cross is a torture device. It is a capital punishment killing machine. And we walk around with the images on us, which is interesting because we love our images. And if Jesus had died by any other method, you better believe we'd make jewelry out of it. You'd better believe we would have bracelets with WWJD with a syringe on the other side of it. Boy, that would be a mixed message. That would be a mixed message in our culture with drug use and heroin and everything else. That would be a mixed message, but we would totally be doing that because we love our images. Okay, and here's God saying, no images. Not like that. Don't worship images. I mean, how many people love their angels? And they got their angels everywhere, and pictures of this angel, and paintings of that angel, and the ones. And I'm like, I'm not telling you to get rid of those. They're fine. And all our images of things they're fine because they're not images of God. That's the thing He's really forbidding, or images that we're worshiping, like the golden calf incident and things like that, or of other gods. But I do start to begin to question some things. Like when I look at the angels, and I start asking, okay, you got these angels, that's nice, but it's interesting that all the angels are male and all your angels here are female. And I find it interesting, you got some that are babies. And there's these little chubby babies. And yes, they're cute, and they got the cute little wings and all. But the babies are called cherub angels because somewhere someone made up this idea that cherubs were baby angels, but yet Satan was a cherub. And Satan's not a baby. Cherubs are not baby angels. They are warrior angels. Okay, it's a cherub that's put down in the Garden of Eden with a sword of fire. They're warrior angels. Okay, they are angels that defend the holiness of God. They're not babies. There is no baby angel anywhere in the Bible. That's just a total science fiction. That's a science fiction as anything, as rock monsters being in the Noah story. I mean, they're just totally science fiction. Okay, but we have those images everywhere, and it's like, well, why? Do we understand what those images are, that those are made up? And if they're just made up and they're cute, whatever, that's fine. But if someone's like, oh, I love my baby angels, or this is what I love, that God might have baby, and they start developing, thinking this is what the Bible teaches, well, now we're getting untruth taught to us from something that's inaccurate and is leading us down a very weird road. It's no wonder society wants cherubs of all angels to be baby angels, because of course society would take what Satan is and tame it. It's just what our society would do. And so we have this image problem. We love our images. And we got to make images of everything. And then when we do that, we can run across a problem where we end up potentially worshiping the creation rather than the creator. That's the danger that can end up being there and not even realize that we're there until we realize that, and maybe we get this realization. We have this image, and we thought that image was 100% truth and 100% right. Then we read the Bible and realize, oh, it's not right. Or maybe I got to put the image in the Bible and make it this. So now every time I see the word cherub, it means a cute little baby, which makes Genesis really weird. Because then you got gaga goo goo, and it just doesn't work. Okay. And so on it goes. And so here's this whole thing, this warning, this thing about, man, you gotta be careful about images, because when you have an image comes the temptation to manipulate, comes the temptation to control. This is why some religious groups has like little saints of different people on different pendulums and different necklaces, so that they have it, because if they have the image on them, then it serves protection to them because the image is there. And if they lose that image, lose that emblem, lose that amulet, lose that necklace, now they've lost that protection. So they got to get it back in order to have that protection, because I guess without that necklace, God won't protect you. You see where an image is now manipulating God? That he has to answer the way you want him to answer, has to be in the affirmative, has to be in the positive, has to be now as you are controlling it with your necklace, with your jewelry, with your painting, with your picture on a wall that's been engraved, with your knitting and crochet work, whatever it is. Man, we love our images. And it's a problem. It can really be a problem. And we got to be deeply careful. And so here's Moses warning Israel, saying, man, be careful of your images. Like don't be about worshiping the creation over the creator. Don't think that you can control God that way or manipulate God that way, or think that he is forced to respond like some machine just because you evoked a certain word or a certain phrase, or you got a certain picture or a certain pendant, and on it goes. God doesn't function that way. And when we realize that God is non-corporeal, God doesn't have a body, it's because our imagination cannot contain the greatness of God. Because his greatness is beyond what we could ever imagine, ever dream up in our head. We could not fathom what he could possibly look like, because he is so far above anything we could conjure up. God is greater than Morgan Freeman, for those that watch Bruce Almighty. God is greater than just an old man with a white beard sitting on a chair. I mean, he's not Santa Claus. Okay, he is so much beyond that. And so God tells Israel, man, don't even try. Don't even begin. Don't even go there. If you are able to make an image of it, it is not worth your worship. That's kind of the point of Deuteronomy 4:15-24. If you can carve it, if you can draw it, if you can paint it, if you can hold it, if you can put it in your pocket, your God's too small. Your God's too small. If you're able to look at it and realize that this is how it looks, your God's too small. That he's above that. He's beyond that. Man, the temptation we really have, the images that we just love to have. That's why he gives the second command. There will be no images of your God. You will make no grave. That's the second commandment of the 10 Commandments. Now, we're going to talk about that in a lot more detail, because there's actually, when we get to the second giving of the law, there is application of that goes beyond your imagination of what it could really mean. It is phenomenal. When we go through the 10 Commandments in detail later on, it is amazing. Later on, not meaning tonight, so don't think that we're going to be here that long. That'll be a few weeks down the road. Okay, but we're going to go through each of the 10 commandments one at a time, and we're going to look at Deuteronomy's chapters 15 to 20, the core of the Deuteronomy, and how those lay out an application of the 10 commandments. And it will blow your mind. It is amazing what God gives us when he gives us his commentary on the 10 commandments. He has given us that, and it means a lot. And we're going to have a lot of fun with that. But for now, we get this beginning introduction to that concept. And I want us to be able to kind of stop and apply this of what this means. We've already kind of hammered through some of these. I've not been clicking this like I should have been clicking. And so let us, I thought I had a whole separate page on that, and I don't. Or is that where it doesn't belong? Nope, I don't have it. Well, isn't that exciting? So another thing I wanted to be able to talk about, I don't know why our Rachel lost the song and I lost my application slides. So our computer has gremlins. Anyway, I don't need it. You don't need it. We'll be fine. So here's another thought. So we talked about God's his image and what that means today, and all within that. There's one other thing I would like to leave us to close with today. One other last thought, and that has to deal with Israel being told that they were in Egypt, and Egypt was called a furnace. Did you catch that? I told you we're going to come back to it in a moment, and then I stopped reading the text just for a moment, and I mentioned, remember that word? We're going to come back to it, the word furnace. Okay, the word furnace. The Hebrew word means kiln. Okay, and the idea of a kiln is not the type of furnace that you cook in that type of way. It's not where you take a bunch of flour and egg and water and milk, mix it all together and some yeast and whatever else you're making, and shove it in and wait for 15 minutes, and out comes a loaf of bread. Woohoo! Okay, that's not the main purpose of this type of furnace. And it's not about heating your house, right? Where you go to your wall and you click a little thing and you're able to say, it's chilly in here because it's snowing outside. I want it to be 72. Or whatever the case is. It's not meaning that either. The idea of a kiln and how this is being used has to deal with when you put gold or metals or whatever in for refining. Okay, and you're meant to cook out the impurities. It's a hotter grill than you would ever cook something in. If you want bread to go in something like that, like it's being burnt in the first minute, okay? That's what we're talking about, something that can melt metal, right? That's a hot furnace, right? Okay, this is like I've been around. I used to work at this factory up in Michigan back when I was in my undergraduate years, and I worked at a place called ODL. It was stood for Ottawa Door and Lighting, and we made hurricane windows. And I worked next to the glass oven all summer long. Yeah, that motivated me not to drop out of college. So I'm like, if this is how the other people work, this is not for me. Like, I want something different than this. Like, God bless those people who do that job, because holy cow, that job was rough. Okay, and I did it for several months throughout the summer, and it was like 130, 140 degrees in the room where we were working, and that was at 3 in the morning. Okay, and they walked around all day with Gatorade. I mean, we're talking, it was a hot oven because it was hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of degrees to melt the glass like that to form these hurricane windows. And it's even hotter if you got to melt metal. Okay, so here's this thing where God is telling Moses to tell Israel that Egypt was like this metal refining furnace, this kiln. Okay, it was like that it was refining them. Because they might have had some questions. I bet they had these questions. Like, God, we were in Egypt as slaves for over 400 years. What gives? Why did you wait so honking long? And God's like, you needed to be refined. You needed to be refined. It was hot. It was terrible. It was uncomfortable. It was miserable. It was terrible, but you needed to be refined. You needed to be refined. And I run across people that are like, man, God rescued me, but why didn't he rescue me sooner? And we have those questions. And one of the many potential reasons for the delay of God's deliverance is about refining. It's about refining. It's about suffering so that out of that, we're able to better serve God. Here is a true statement for you. The deeper you suffer, the better you serve. And I know that's hard to hear. And it seems countercultural and it seems antithesis to everything. But the more you suffer, the better you serve. That's why I tell kids, don't drop out of high school. You're missing such prime suffrage, man. and you're not going to serve as well if you don't make it through high school. Okay, but the more pain you experience in life, people go, man, my childhood was terrible. Man, all this was terrible. And it's like, man, that is terrible. And there was a lot of sin there, and that was horrible. And that was against what God wanted. That was against his will, because sin is against the will of God. Do not ever think God caused the suffering as a vicarious sinner in order for you to be better. That's not what God is doing. But God allows it to exist, chooses not to intervene, allowing sin to run its course because he knows that in the end, you're going to be a better servant for people that are hurting, because he knows you're going to be better refined and a better metal and a better piece of application as a result. He doesn't cause it, he's not doing it, but he is allowing it as a refining process. And I've had people come up to me and they're like, just even not that long ago, I had this guy, his name was Frank. He was an amazing man, godly man. He was a director of mission for the entire Upper Peninsula of Michigan. He was a pastor of many churches. That dude has done ministry more years than I've been alive. And even still, I mean, that guy was amazing. And in his early 90s, his wife had passed away. And I got to officiate her funeral. And it was heartbreaking because I've known them since I was a kid. Because when they were the director of missions and pastors up in Upper Peninsula, Michigan, that's when I was a kid. And I was up there. And they had eaten at our house when I was a kid. They knew me and knew of me. So when I became a pastor of a church in Michigan and Lower Peninsula in Grand Rapids, were attending that church, and they're like, wow, little itty bitty Johnny's all grown up and pastor at a church. Oh, this is a disaster. And like, this is amazing. So I've known them for so long. So when his wife passed, it was heartbreaking, and it was sad. And then I went over and visited him a little while after the funeral was done. And I'm sitting in his house, in his little condo thingy that he was at for the elderly. And it was like a assisted living type center, but not assisted living. You know what I mean? It's like he has his own apartment and it's his own place, and no one lives with him. He is private, but yet it's part of a community, right? You know what I'm talking about? Where he can go and play canasta with a bunch of people and whatnot, and there's like a cafeteria and whatnot. Okay, so it's independent, assisted care living type of place. And so I'm in his place. I'm sitting with him in his living room area, and he's sitting there, and he's deep in thought. And I know that when you're in your 90s, your thoughts are a little bit slower than when you're 40 and you talk 100 miles a minute. But nonetheless, he's thinking. I'm letting him think, and he looked at me and he said, "Why am I still here?" Was his question to me. Why am I still here? He's like, and Israel asked this: God, why are we still in Egypt? Or after they've left, God, why are we not in the promised land yet? We're a new generation. Why aren't we there yet? Why are we still here and not there? So here's Frank looking at me right in the face. And he says, why am I still here and not in my promised land? Why am I here? He said, my thinking is slow. And when I'm hearing people talk, by the time I've formulated my thoughts and am able to speak, there are already two conversations beyond that they don't even remember the conversation taking place of which I'm about to reply. So I don't speak. I can't speak. I can't share wisdom with anyone. I can't talk with any group conversations. I can't teach anyone. My wife has gone. I don't have to take care of her anymore. Why am I still here? Why am I in this land and not in that land? He felt like Israel. The point of Deuteronomy chapter 4. Why am I here? And, then there's me. Like, I'm new at pastoring at that time. Okay. I'm like, I was like, man, this is my first church, and you're laying this on me. Like, wow, thanks, dude. You're a jerk. It was just so hard to hear that. And he's like, I can't move well. I can't do anything for the church. He's like, I know I can pray for the church, and I do that, but I can pray there. I don't have to pray here. Why? And he's like, but yet I believe in the sovereignty of God, so he hasn't taken me yet. He could, he hasn't, so what gives? Why am I here? To which I offered him a couple of thoughts. And I told him I can never be one to ever presume that I'm able to perfectly interpret every thought of God. I cannot be one to presume to have every motivation of God captured into a sentence. So, but based upon what I know of Scripture, I can give you some musings. I can give you just some thoughts, and maybe they will bring you comfort. Maybe they will give you some areas of prayer and focus. And so I offered a couple things. One, Deuteronomy 4, the furnace of Egypt. Oh, dear Frank, you still got some refining left. You're in the oven and you're cooking, and you want out of the oven, but you're not refined yet. Not enough. God still has more refining left to do. I don't know if you've ever had that you're cooking like a cake in the oven, and you know you don't want to take it out too early or that cake will fall. You know you don't want to take it out too early or that cake will be gooey in the middle, and that's not good. Right? You want your cake to be nice and fluffy and moist. You don't want it to come out and bite into it and have it be like you're eating paste. Right? That's just nasty. So what do you do with a cake when you don't want to take it out too early? You do what? Well, you leave it in, but what do you take a toothpick, right? And you poke it and you say, oh, it's not done yet. You need to be in here a little longer. And you close the oven. Okay, so part one, I'm like, Frank, you need to be refined. You need to be refined just a little longer. And then part two, I said, Frank, you made a mistake when you said you have nothing left to teach. And he looked at me weird. And I knew he was going to start formulating thoughts, so I had to speak quick. I had to interrupt that train. And I said, just hang on, Frank. I said, you still have a lesson to teach that nobody can teach but you and people in your situation. And I said, and that is this. Paul has told us that running the Christian life is like running a race. Okay, you have many laps to do. And the idea of Paul's metaphor of a race is that even if you fall and you trip, you don't sit on the track and say, oh, woe is me, I quit. You get up and you keep running. The goal is not so much about coming in first as it is finishing the race. And I said, so Frank, it's true. You're on your last lap. Maybe even coming around the last bend. I don't know where you're at on your race. I do know this. You need to finish well. We can read about people finishing well, but when we see it, that means so much more. We have high schoolers, college students that don't know how to finish well. And I told Frank, I'm like, you have run your life for Christ fervently with perseverance. I'm like, don't yell ahead and ask them to move the finish line closer to you. Keep running. Even if it seems like nobody's watching, even if it seems like there's no cheer squad for you anymore, even if it seems like your partner has passed off the baton and now the partner's not there because your spouse is gone and now you're running solo, you keep running and you don't give up and you don't quit. You persevere with faith in God until you cross that finish line, not until that finish line comes to you. And you keep running to it. And you run with perseverance. I'm like, that is finishing well and not giving up. I'm like, don't die sooner. You keep running because people need to see what it means that up to your last breath, you were faithful to run. Show the church not just how to run well, but how to finish well. I'm like, and in that process, when you cross that finish line, you will be refined. The oven will be open and you will be taken out and you will be the cake God wanted you to be that everyone would be able to celebrate and enjoy together. That's the message. And that's the message that Israel is given in Deuteronomy 4. A whole lot in 10 verses. Oh, what a great God we have. That will tell us how to honor him, how to serve him, and at the same time say, man, finish well. Because God's a jealous God and he wants the cake to come out at his time, not the time of the cake. Finish well. Let's have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, how mysterious are your ways. Lord, we don't have your calendar. We don't have your plan. We don't know everything that you have in mind. We have glimpses. We have your word. We have history of a life with you and you working in the lives of people. But Lord, it's still a mystery. And sometimes we get impatient. I ask, Lord, that you comfort us in those impatient times. I ask, Lord, that you hold us close to you. Let us rest in your sovereign arms, knowing that the time will come in your time, even though it's not our time. Help us find that peace, that comfort, and that joy in your arms as we wait to see you in person. Oh, Lord, how long and great that day will be. But until then, Lord, help us to persevere and run the race for your honor and your glory. This we ask in your Son's name, Jesus Christ.